Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1396A, and today's date is October 9th, 2017, and the title of the episode is Something Just Happened in the Market. Red alert, red alert. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, as we've been watching, we've been seeing the corporations get into trouble where they are not making the profits. And this is not just happening in the United States, it's happening around the globe. And we're seeing companies pop up here and there. We're seeing financial institutions pop up here and here where they're completely insolvent or they can't make ends meet and they're having problems. Out in Germany, the second largest airline, Air Berlin, they've been battling for a very long time to survive, but it looks like they're going to have to cut around 1,400 workers. And we see right now that they are going to be bankrupt. And right now, Air Berlin employs around 8,600 people, including part-timers. Flights will end on October 28th at the latest. The media is reporting that on Monday that talks between Air Berlin and EasyJet over the sale of up to about 30 planes are at risk of falling apart. And we can see right now that they're having major problems. Now, the German carrier announced a major restructuring plan last year to shrink its fleet and cut over 1,000 jobs. It booked losses of about 1.2 billion euros over the past 2 years, making the company rely on cash infusions from principal shareholders. And we see right now that they are in a heap of trouble at this point, and problems are going to continue on as we move throughout this year into next year. And it's not just with this company. We're seeing many other airlines also having a problem. We're seeing retail have a problem. We're seeing corporations having a problem, manufacturing corporations having a problem, and all of this is happening all at the same time. Now, this is when the central bankers have been telling us that everything is fine, that they fixed all the problems, that companies should be thriving, people should be getting jobs, and everyone should be feeling really good. But what's been happening is, well, it's the opposite. Companies have been lying, faking data. They've been using accounting methods to make everything look fantastic. And we've seen this in the past with Bear Stearns, AIG, Enron, and many other corporations. And what happened in the end? Well, everything started to fall apart. Now, we know here in the United States, there is a massive public pension problem and also a private pension problem. Many of them are underfunded and will never be able to pay workers the promised benefits. Now, it's not just here in the U.S. Europe is now in the spotlight. The UK is headed to a retirement implosion. The UK now has about 4 trillion retirement savings shortfall, which is projected to rise 4% a year and reach 33 trillion by 2050. This in a country whose total GDP is 3 trillion. That means the shortfall is already bigger than the entire economy. And even if inflation is modest, the situation is going to get just worse. Plus, these figures are based mostly on calculations made before the UK left the European Union. 80% of the Irish who have pensions don't think they'll have sufficient income in retirement. 47% don't even have pensions. The Swiss are no different, despite everyone believing that everything is fine there. France, Belgium, Germany, Austria, Spain, they're all in deep trouble. They are all pay-as-you-go countries. That means they have nothing saved in the public coffers for future pension obligations, and the money has to come out of general budget each year. And we see right now the Spanish, their reserve fund at one time had about 66 billion euros and is now estimated to be completely depleted by the end of 2018. I mean, think about this for a second. The United States has a pension problem. Europe has a pension problem. This is going to be a complete and utter disaster. Now, we've been watching bubbles here in the United States. We know back in 2000 we had the dot-com bubble. 2007 we had the housing bubble. In 2017 they're calling it the everything bubble right now. And what do I mean by everything bubble? Well, we have real estate. You can spot real estate bubbles all around the world. Canada, Australia, Sweden, Hong Kong, China, California. They all have housing bubbles. In California, housing prices, they went up by 69% in 2010. And right now, the Canadian housing shot up about 1,040% over the same period. Stocks also. Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google are responsible for over 30% of the S&P 500 index gain in market capitalization in 2017. Now, they call it the FANG stock. This is a fad like the Nifty 50 back in the 60s. And we know what happened with the Nifty 50. Things completely fell apart. And what we're seeing right now is the same thing is going to happen with the FANG stocks. And we remember, the central bankers, they've been funding the FANG stock growth in the stock market. They've been buying a lot of these stocks. And we see right now that this cannot be sustained. This is completely manipulated. We also have the credit bubble. Corporate bonds, particularly high yield, and especially European high yield, are a bubble. Credit spreads are tighter than they've ever been. Just as global central banks attempt to coordinate a tightening monetary policy, central banks tend to become very hawkish right as the economy is about to roll over. We have all the classic warning signs of a big market top. Extra tight credit, extra low volatility, FANG, complacency in general, retail looking smart, pros looking stupid, short rates rising, curve flattening, pain trade is probably lower, not higher, and yet people are mostly ignoring all of this. They're not really seeing it. Now, we have been following the economy. We understand what is happening. This doesn't happen overnight like everyone thinks, like you're going to wake up one morning and the economy just came down. It takes the central bank a long time to pump up the system. They've been pumping it up for around 8 or 9 years. We're at that end point at this point, and we're seeing a lot of the indicators showing us that something is about to happen. Now, yes, the central bank, they can manipulate, they can pretend that the economy is doing well, they can push the stock market up, but eventually what's going to happen, something is going to break. Confidence will be lost, a black swan will happen, and things will start to tumble down. Now, we're starting to see that the corporate media is out there, and they're getting a little bit nervous about the economy. They're starting to mention things like the stock market. And they're starting to look at certain indicators, and things aren't making sense when they start looking at certain things like the relative strength indicator. Now, for months, as we know, stock market pessimists have been saying that the U.S. equities are overvalued, which they are. Actually, they're manipulated. And as of this past week, they have a major piece of evidence. The measure in question is the so-called relative strength indicator, RSI, which indicates when the stock market has gotten too stretched in either direction. Guess what? We have major problems. Now, when the measure of this RSI, the relative strength indicator, exceeds 70, guess what happens? We have a downturn. Guess what? We've hit over 70. We're almost up to 80. And when we look at this, and we look at the RSI, which is above 70, this happened before, back in February of 2017. Here we are in October of 2017, and we're at almost the same exact part of having this RSI around 70, 80. We can see that there's going to be a problem. We've seen this before back in 2008. We're seeing it now. And this is an indicator, just another indicator to let us know that we're going to have a huge amount of problems ahead of us. Now, yes, the central bank, they're going to do whatever they possibly can to control the situation. Remember, if the system comes down, they're going to be responsible for it coming down, because what else brought the system down? We're not in a war. There's no event. The Fed has been controlling the economy. They've been having their meetings. They've been telling us that everything is fine. And if the economy just all of a sudden comes down, and I'm not even talking about the economy, I should be saying if the stock market all of a sudden comes down, they have a lot of explaining to do. The economy and the stock market are two separate things. The stock market can be manipulated, they can keep it up, they can pretend that everything is fine. The real economy, you see it ripping itself apart, and the economy always rips itself apart before the stock market comes down. So we've been in trouble for a very long time, and we've been watching housing decline. We've been watching retail decline. We've been watching the corporations show earnings, but not really revenue and sales, because earnings can be manipulated. Revenue and sales cannot be. We see the tax receipts flowing into the government have been declining. We know that the unemployment numbers are completely manipulated. So the real economy has been slowly deteriorating over time while they keep the stock market up. It's a gigantic illusion. And if we look back in time, they've done this before, back in 29, every time we had a recession, back in 2008. I mean, think about it. The stock market, it was at 14,000 something points. It was at the height of the market. I mean, it was, everyone was looking at it going, wow, this is fantastic. And during this period of time, housing was falling apart. People were losing jobs. Companies were getting into trouble. But they told us everything was fine. People even looked into the subprime securities and they saw that these were complete garbage. But they told us they weren't. And here we are today. The same thing is happening, but it is much worse. Why? Because they didn't fix anything. All they did was take pieces of tape, taped over it, pretended it didn't exist, and just made the problem a lot worse. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. It doesn't put it out, it makes it much larger. Yes, you can convince the public that we're doing the best we can and this is normal when you see the fire, get larger before it puts itself out. And maybe people will believe that. People are believing that we're in this recovery when we are not. All they're doing is putting gasoline on the fire, telling people that everything is fine. The same thing is happening that happened back in 2008, but it's much worse. This is why everyone needs to be ready and prepared for what is coming, because when it hits, yes, it will happen very quickly. And at that point, you'll have a couple of days to make sure that you can run around and get what you need, because when people start to realize that the central bank has lost control, and of course, yes, they're going to try to pump the stock market back up, they're going to start the stimulus, but people are going to start to realize that these companies are laying off people left and right, because this is the excuse they're going to use to lay the people off. It's going to be a complete disaster, and you'll have that small, tiny window, but believe me, people are going to start catching wind, and they're going to start running out, and they're going to get whatever they have to. This is why it's better to be prepared and ready for this, so you don't have to be running around like crazy. Because we can see right now, with every single indicator that we've been looking at, it's all pointing to the same thing. A recession, depression, collapse. That is it. So get prepared. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.